Funny stories.
Yeah.
Oh, God. What do you want to hear about?
I don't know anything. About the nut house then.
The nut house. When we was kids, with my sister Nellie, I was about 9, she was 11 years of age. We used to wander up the riverside, right alongside the fever hospital, what was in Rotherhithe Street. Well, it was a mystery hospital because nobody really saw any patients going in or coming out. If someone hurt themselves, they was to be sent to St Oliver's Hospital. When you consider all the men who worked in the wards and the doctor and who had injuries, and if a kid was taken ill with a temperature, and you had to pay the doctor 2 and 6. Well, hardly anybody had 2 and 6 in them days for him to come down and look at you. And then if you did take them up to the hospital, you had to walk. Because 9 out of 10 times, an ambulance, well, it was, what can I say, a thing in the past. You never hardly saw an ambulance. And you was treated at the local hospital by the local butchers, they called the doctors. And, well, they kept you in here for a couple of weeks until you got better. And they just chucked you home. Kids was in rags. When they went to school, we didn't get no free dinners in them days. You'd be lucky if you got a little tiny bottle of milk. We used to run home from school, make out we was going to have a dinner. We used to get a bit of bread and sauce or a bit of jam and a bit of bread. And when we went back to school, the kids used to say, "What did you have for dinner?" We used to say, "Well, we had a roast dinner and bisto gravy." And they started calling us bisto every time they saw us in the streets. Plus the fact that all the boys was twice the size of me and the girls was bigger than my sister, and we was always picked on, but funny enough, we survived it, and most of them all dead now. Just that, so.
Tell me about the time when you used to look over the wall of the fever hospital and see them.
We used to, opposite Trinity Church, what was it, Trinity Church? There was a hospital. Well, at the end of the hospital, there was a right of way for the lighterman to go up and tie the barges up. If a lighterman was working this side of the river, when he was done, he would tie his barges up alongside the wharf. If he was finishing the other side, he had to tie his barges there. But always, if they lived in this side of the docks, they would tie the barges up there. And the right of way was right alongside the wall of the hospital. And with my sister, we was up there one day about 1938, and I climbed up and looked over the wall, and I saw this boat was anchored there, and there was a crane, and they was lowering a patient over on a stretcher. And there was another man in a steel cage, and he was handcuffed to the railings of the bed, and there was a big fat hospital porter there with a white jacket on and a black coat with a big stick banging on the side, and shouting and all, and he was shouting and the patient was shouting. But according to statistics, they reckon it closed in 1930. Well, it couldn't have done because my sister verified the fact that we still saw it being used. You didn't see many ambulances going in there. There'd be an old yellow ambulance used to go in there, and nobody knew really that it was a fever hospital. I sometimes wonder, when Captain Wilson of the East India Dock Company went to the remote islands and the king out there sent his son back with him to Britain, Princely Boo, he caught smallpox in Rotherhithe. Whether he was treated at the hospital or not, I don't know, because they got the records, but he's buried in St Mary's Church, Rotherhithe, and he did write books, so he was a famous figure, and a lot of people didn't know at the time that he was a prince. It was only years and years afterwards when people started looking at the tomb what he was buried in, that they was all talking about Princely Boo. So that was part of the history what a lot of people didn't know, plus the fact that every time the tide rose, it'd be all green slimy water running down the streets, and people just used to stand and look at it. And when I got a job for Mears Civil Engineering Company, on about the last 3 days of the contract, I was down here with the bosses on the GLC, and I said to Bob Small, I said, where do you reckon all that water's coming from, Bob? And we both looked over the side and we saw there was an 18-inch tidal flap was missing. These was flaps like big dinner plates that stopped the Thames water from coming up the embankment and running down the drains into the roadway. And yet for over 60 years people just stood and watched it. And I cured that.
I'll stop it now, Dad.